Welcome back to the Containment Zone, where architecture is not always shelter, where doors don't just open to rooms, but to something else. Some anomalies bleed into our world through biology, through sound, through belief. This one, it enters through a stairwell. You've seen stairs like it. Concrete, unmarked, maybe in an old school building or an abandoned dormitory, somewhere that feels quiet even when it shouldn't. But once you step through this door, you don't go down into the dark. The dark comes up to meet you. SCP-087, an unlit stairwell located in the psychology department of a now decommissioned university campus in northern Pennsylvania. It wasn't part of the blueprints, no maintenance records, no structural connections, just a plain steel door with a label above it that simply read, "Restricted access, authorized personnel only." But the door didn't lock. It didn't seal. It waited, and when it opened, there were stairs. Concrete, worn, spiraling down, and the sound of something breathing, very softly. In the dark below, it was dismissed at first, just an architectural oversight, an old access shaft, until the first student descended alone and never came back. The university staff filed the missing student report the same day. A freshman psychology major, seen entering the lower wing late at night, never left. No cameras captured her exit. No alarms were triggered. No noise was reported. Just one open door and the sound of footsteps, descending out of range. Campus security conducted a sweep of the building, found nothing unusual, until one officer approached the open stairwell and reported hearing a child crying. From somewhere deep below, he radioed for backup. 2 minutes later, the transmission cut out. When the second team arrived, the stairwell was empty, but the radio lay at the third landing, still on, faint static, and somewhere in it, the sound of someone breathing very slowly, right next to the microphone. That's when the Foundation stepped in. SCP-087 was sealed. Scans showed no bottom. Every attempt at remote mapping failed. Acoustic tests confirmed the source of the crying was located, approximately 200 meters below the first platform. But the sound never changed, never shifted. It remained exactly 200 meters below, no matter how far anyone went down. 4 exploratory missions were conducted in the first week, each with different equipment, lighting, and personnel rotation. Each ended the same way: confusion, signal loss, and the sound of something moving, just out of frame. On the second mission, the field agent descended 74 steps before freezing in place. He reported seeing something on the lower platform, a pale face, eyeless, motionless, watching him from the dark. He ascended immediately, was recovered unharmed, but refused to speak again. 3 days later, he discharged himself from Foundation care, left no forwarding address, and has not been located since. The file was reclassified, hazard level elevated, all access restricted to D-class personnel. But even they, even the most hardened and indifferent among them, reacted the same way. The moment they crossed the threshold, their voices changed. They spoke slower, quieter, like the air had thickened, like they weren't alone. One described it as walking into the lungs of something older than buildings. Another simply said, "It knows I'm here." None of them ever reached the bottom, because SCP-87 doesn't end, it waits for you to give up trying to leave. SCP-087 has no fixed dimensions. Externally, the structure should be contained within a 3-story academic building. Internally, the stairwell descends indefinitely. Infrared mapping shows an uninterrupted vertical shaft exceeding 3 kilometers. But no scanning method has reached a definitive floor. The stairwell itself is consistent in form: 13 steps per flight, a landing, and a 180-degree turn. Bare concrete walls, no markings, no graffiti, no dust. But those who descend. Report changes, distances stretch, sounds loop, voices echo in ways that don't match the stairwell's shape. And always, that crying, software young, and just far enough away to sound real. Never closer, never fading. One experiment used a tethered camera drone with a 1.5-kilometer reinforced cable. The drone recorded nearly 17 minutes of descent, past hundreds of flights, all identical, until the feed cut out mid-frame with the camera lens slowly turning towards something in the dark that wasn't there a moment before. Attempts to rewind the footage always fail at the same point. The drone does not respond to manual commands, and every technician involved in the mission reported nightmares for weeks. The Foundation considered cutting into the side of the stairwell to identify its structural limits. The concrete drill engaged, began rotation, made contact, and then stopped. Not mechanically, not electronically. It simply stopped moving. The technician operating it described a pressure behind the wall, like something pushing back, not with force, but with suggestion, as if the wall had decided not to be opened. Other readings followed. Subtle seismic tremors, not matching any known tectonic activity. Electromagnetic fluctuations from deep within the shaft. Thermal anomalies inconsistent with subterranean airflow. And yet, no source could be located. No chamber, no energy. Just the stairs, the crying, and the feeling that nothing below the 13th flight was built by people. One analyst referred to the stairwell as geometrically neutralized, a structure that mimics stability, but operates on something else entirely. Space doesn't behave normally here. Gravity feels slower. Sound travels wrong, and direction becomes a matter of will. Because those who walk downward always feel they're being pulled deeper by something that doesn't need to touch them to guide their steps. SCP-087 does not contain a single entity. It is not one thing. It is an environment. And within that environment, there is something that knows you're there. The crying heard from within the stairwell has never been identified. The voice is young, childlike, estimated between 6 and 8 years old. It loops continuously. One slow, mournful phrase repeated at irregular intervals. But the source is always out of reach. No matter how far personnel descend, the crying remains 200 meters below. Not 200 steps, not 200 seconds, always 200 vertical meters. This doesn't match acoustic logic. The stairwell should distort the sound. It should become fainter with distance. Instead, it follows, constant in tone, constant in direction, like it's not traveling through the air at all, but through you. On the 5th exploration mission, D-Class Subject 087-5 was equipped with a directional microphone, full-body monitor suite, and a two-way headset. At the 14th landing, the subject paused, said he felt watched. At the 17th, he began to hear movement behind him. Not footsteps, but soft shifts in weight, as if someone barefoot was mimicking his rhythm. Exactly 1 step behind, he stopped walking. The sound did not. When ordered to turn around, he complied slowly and described a face at the edge of the last landing. White, smooth, eyes missing, mouth unmoving, expression blank. He blinked once. The face was gone. He resumed descent, shaking, whispering under his breath. At the 29th flight, the the child's voice changed. It stopped crying, began whispering, words that didn't match the language of any known dialect. The subject began to repeat them unconsciously, breathing irregular, heart rate elevated, skin temperature dropping. The session was aborted. But before the retrieval signal was confirmed, the subject muttered one final sentence into the headset. "It's not a stairwell, it's a mouth." The feed cut. No transmission reestablished. No remains were recovered. The next day, audio engineers reviewing the recording isolated a secondary signal. A layered voice whispering beneath the child's cries. Not language, not words, but syllables. Breath-forming shape. With no speaker. And the final 3 seconds of the recording, when slowed by a factor of 200, revealed something impossible. The crying resolved. Into laughter, not from a child. From something older, something that had been pretending. And now that it had been heard, it didn't need to cry anymore. Not everyone who descends SCP-087 is lost, but none return unchanged. Subjects who have reached below the 20th platform report a common sensation, not of being watched, but of being studied, as if their presence is not a disruption, but an invitation. Cognitive assessments post-recovery show a consistent pattern: disrupted circadian rhythm, auditory hallucinations during sleep, diminished fear response, compulsive sketching of impossible architecture. One individual drew a spiraling floor plan, with over 400 descending levels, each marked with a single word, hollow. Another began counting aloud at all times. When asked why, he replied, "If I stop, I'll hear it again." Subjects also report distortions in memory. One claimed to have been inside SCP-087 for 12 hours. His camera feed lasted only 26 minutes. Another stated he heard his own voice echoing from beneath him, saying things he hadn't said yet, giving instructions, whispering secrets in the cadence of his own breath. Some exhibit full personality displacement. 1D class, previously diagnosed with sociopathic tendencies, became withdrawn, docile, afraid of silence. He refused to speak unless someone else was speaking at the same time. When asked why, he answered, "It listens through the quiet." In the weeks following repeated exposure tests, 2 researchers independently began experiencing overlapping dreams. Both described a child standing at the top of an endless stairwell, face in shadow, voice muffled. The child never moved, but something behind it did. Something not visible, but felt dash. A presence so vast that the walls seemed to breathe with its heartbeat. One dream ended with the child turning its head, not to look, but to warn, "It only waits because you're not ready." After that night, both researchers requested reassignment. One changed fields entirely. The other has not entered a building with a basement since. The Foundation initiated a long-term observation program. 12 staff members rotated through SCP-087 for passive exposure, standing at the threshold, never descending. By week 3, 10 of the 12 had experienced symptoms: loss of depth perception, phantom echoes, compulsive blinking, and most disturbing, a sense that the stairs had shifted when they weren't looking. Because SCP-087 doesn't just change the people inside it, it remembers them, adapts to them, and waits for the moment they begin to believe that going down is the only way out. The Foundation has long stopped referring to SCP-087 as just a stairwell. It behaves like a space, but not one grounded in architecture. There are no structural supports, no electrical systems, no foundation beneath. Nothing holding it in place, except the certainty that it is there. Some theories suggest it is not a place at all. but a manifestation, a psychological parasite, constructed from spatial memory and emotional resonance. The term used in one report was resonant topology, a self-sustaining concept that builds itself from the minds of those who observe it. Not an illusion, not a hallucination, but a feedback loop between fear and design. The more attention it receives, the more real it becomes. The Foundation attempted to seal SCP-087 indefinitely, poured concrete, reinforced steel, lead-lined doors, redundant anchors. Yet sensors still detect pressure changes behind the barrier, micro shifts in air temperature, fluctuations in ambient sound. The crying continues, even with no entry point. One proposal, now classified, suggested that SCP-087 is a cognitive fissure, a tear not in the building, but in the mental landscape of human consciousness. A flaw, an echo of a place we're all trying to forget, but which remembers us instead. Another theory claims the structure doesn't lead downward, but inward, that the stairs spiral not into Earth, but into identity. The further you go, the less of yourself you bring back. Those who stare into the stairwell for extended periods report seeing movement in the corner of their vision, not ahead of them, behind, like someone just walked up the stairs and stood one step behind, waiting for them to turn around. That's when the final theory emerges, that SCP-087 isn't what it appears at all. It's not a space, it's not a creature, it's not a phenomenon. It's an invitation, an open question, written in the shape of dissent. And once you begin to answer it, you never really stop walking. SCP-087 remains sealed. The Foundation has reinforced the door 3 times. No further missions are authorized, not because of danger, but because of doubt. Because it's not clear what SCP-087 actually does. There's no contagion, no broadcast, no expansion. It doesn't hunt, it doesn't reach out, it just waits, and it always has. Everyone who's entered has described the same feeling, that they've been there before, that the walls remember them, that the silence recognizes their name. Some believe SCP-087 is connected to something older, a structure beneath awareness, woven into instinct. The fear of dark stairs, the hesitation before descending, the breath you hold when the light doesn't reach the next landing. We've all felt it. That quiet refusal from our body that says, "Not this time." The Foundation refers to SCP-087 as a fixed location anomaly. But maybe that's not true. Maybe it's portable, conceptual, carried in memory, stored in the image of a concrete stairwell, lit only by the flashlight in your shaking hand. Maybe you don't need to open the door for it to open something in you. Because SCP-087 doesn't need you to enter, it just needs you to wonder what's waiting at the bottom. And if you're still thinking about that question, after all this time, then maybe you're already descending. Thank you for observing another anomaly in the Containment Zone. Sleep well. And if you hear crying in the dark, don't answer. It's not calling for help. It's calling for company.